There are many reasons why children can no longer be cared for by their parents. Parents may have a substance use disorder, mental illness, incarceration, or perhaps have even died. Placement with a family member who can provide safety, permanence, and well-being is preferred over placement with someone who has no connections to the child. The Department of Children's Services has an obligation to minimize the impact of trauma on children removed from their parents. Often, trauma of separation is reduced when children are placed with relatives. It is in everybody's best interest if caregivers know the legal options and support services that are available to help them. When a child comes to the attention of the department and is at risk of or the victim of abuse or neglect and in need of out-of-home care, it is the responsibility of DCS staff to engage the family in identifying relatives who may be willing to serve as a placement resource. Whenever a relative is contacted about the possible placement of a child into their home, a discussion regarding the relative's legal options and support services will occur. Recognizing that the time of initial contact may be stressful, DCS staff will revisit this conversation several times with relatives so you understand your options. When caregivers are initially approached about opening their home to a minor relative, it is normal for there to be many emotions, questions, and concerns. Prior to the initial placement of a child in the home of a relative, DCS staff must ensure that you, as a caregiver, understand your legal options, the services available for each option, and the implications of each option for your family. This is what we call full disclosure. As a department, it is our role to explain the differences between the options and services available. Decisions will be made with the family based upon individual needs of the child and family, considering the factors of safety, permanence, and well-being. In this video, you will hear from several families and which option worked for them.
We were just starting out in our careers. Didn't know how we can financially support my sister's 3 young children. After speaking with DCS, we understood that not all are eligible for financial support, but we applied for the Family First Child Only grant through the Department of Human Services. Shortly after, we were granted some monthly funds to help these kids.
With family arranged care, the caregiver provides primary care of a child without any change in legal custody or legal responsibilities of the birth parents, i.e., safety placement. This arrangement is an agreement between family members, is not legally binding, and the parents or caregiver can end this arrangement at any time. TANF, Child Only Grant, and TenCare, depending on income of child and relationship to the caregiver. DCS will not be involved with the child or the family if the family arranges care. The child will not qualify for monthly foster care board payments. The caregiver and child may receive community-based services, including services through the Relative Caregiver Program.
After having a deep conversation with my brother, he came to terms that he couldn't take care of his boys to the best of his abilities. And while he was getting his feet under him, my wife and I are now the power of attorney for the children. It was a simple process. We just had to fill out a form from DCS. My brother signed the form in front of the notary.
Power of attorney is a legal agreement between parents and caregiver to transfer temporary caregiving authority for medical and educational decision-making in hardship situations. With power of attorney, the caregiver has a legal document to help them consent to health care and educational services on behalf of the child. The parents still have legal custody of the child, and they or the caregiver can end the power of attorney at any time. TANF, Child Only Grant, and TenCare, depending on income of child and relationship to the caregiver. There is no ongoing involvement with courts. DCS will not be involved with the child or family if the relative provides care through a power of attorney. The caregiver and child may receive community-based services, including services through the Relative Caregiver Program.
My husband and I got legal custody of our granddaughter and grandson through juvenile court when our daughter tested positive for opiates when she gave birth to her youngest boy. We liked the idea of having legal custody and did not want to go through the process of becoming foster parents. This allowed my daughter to maintain her legal rights, and my husband had a good job with benefits, so that was just the best choice for us.
Legal custody involves the caregiver being granted legal custody or guardianship by court order, juvenile, circuit, or chancery. TANF, child-only grant, and TEN-care, depending on income of child and relationship to the caregiver. Parental rights are not terminated. The child will not qualify for monthly foster care board payments. DCS will not remain involved with the child or family once the caregiver becomes the child's legal custodian or guardian through court unless otherwise stated in the court order. The parents can go to court and ask to have legal custody restored to them and the child returned to them. The caregiver and child may receive community-based services, including services through the Relative Caregiver Program.
We were contacted by DCS about the possibility of becoming a kinship foster placement for our great-nephew who had come into foster care. We were always close to our niece when she was growing up. She actually lived with us for a few years when she was in high school. Even though we've grown apart the last couple of years, she gave her worker our names and number as a possible placement for her son.
With kinship foster care, the child is in the custody of the Department of Children's Services and placed in the home of a caregiver or other adult with a significant relationship. The child is eligible to receive monthly foster care board payments. The caregiver will undergo a background check, home study, and complete foster parent training classes in order to become an approved foster parent. The caregiver is required to participate in meetings to ensure the child achieves permanency in a timely manner. If reunification with the parents is not a viable option, then they can choose to pursue becoming a permanent home for the child. DCS and juvenile court will monitor how the child is doing in the home. Becoming an approved foster parent is the only way to access the subsidized permanent guardianship option discussed later in this video.
The days following my daughter's incarceration were a blur. In addition to dealing with all my emotions just thinking about my daughter being in jail, I had to very quickly prepare to take in her 3 children. I never thought I'd be raising kids again, but those were my grandbabies.
The caregiver becomes the legal parent of the child. Parental rights are terminated or surrendered by the birth parents through the courts. If the child is in DCS custody prior to the adoption finalizing, the child is usually eligible to receive a monthly adoption subsidy, TEN-care, and legal expenses associated with finalizing the adoption. However, if the child is not in DCS custody prior to adoption finalizing, the child is not eligible to receive a monthly adoption subsidy. The adoption subsidy is available to age 18 or in some instances, age 21. DCS will not remain involved once the child is adopted. However, caregivers are eligible for post-adoption support services through Harmony Family Center. Services include individualized counseling, crisis intervention, support groups, educational resources, and relief teams. The caregiver and child may receive community-based services, including services through the Relative Caregiver Program. Youth who are adopted age 16 or older will be eligible for education and training vouchers for higher education or other vocational training.
I received custody of my niece through juvenile court when she was 3 years old. DCS got involved due to concerns that my sister and her husband were being neglectful. My niece is now 8 years old and I am her permanent guardian.
The caregiver or other adult with a significant relationship is granted permanent guardianship by court order in juvenile court. The child may be eligible to receive TANF, child-only grant, and TEN-care. The child will not qualify for monthly board payments. DCS does not remain involved with the child or family once the caregiver becomes the child's permanent guardian. To become a permanent guardian, the child must live with the caregiver for at least 6 months when seeking permanent guardianship. Parental rights are not terminated, but are limited. The caregiver and child may receive community-based services, including services through the Relative Caregiver Program.
I became a foster parent specifically for my son's best friend, and he has lived with us for 2 years. I would have loved to adopt him, but that just wasn't an option. SPG gives him a peace of mind knowing he will always be a part of our family and helps me support him financially.
Subsidized Permanent Guardianship Program is a form of permanent guardianship where the family receives a monthly subsidy. In order to qualify for this program, the child must be in DCS custody or guardianship. The child has resided in a fully approved Kinship foster home for 6 consecutive months. Reunification and adoption have been deemed inappropriate. The potential guardian is permanently committed to caring for the child. The child has been consulted regarding the guardianship agreement if they are age 12 or older. The subsidy will be available up until the age of 18 or in some instances age 21. TenCare may be available as well as legal expenses associated with obtaining subsidized permanent guardianship. To qualify for the subsidized option and be considered a relative or kin home, the caregiver must meet the department's definition of a relative or kin. DCS does not remain involved with the child or family once the caregiver becomes the child's permanent guardian. Parental rights are not terminated but can be limited by the court. Caregivers are eligible for post-guardianship support services through Harmony Family Center. Services include individualized counseling, crisis intervention, support groups, educational resources, and relief teams. Providing care for your relatives' children can feel overwhelming. There are a lot of emotions involved. Additionally, there are a lot of decisions to be made about which options might work best for you and your family. The good thing is, there is support out there, and we are here to help guide you through the process. Relative Caregiver Program is an option available for a relative to care for non-custodial children who require out-of-home care. Child and caregivers receive support services such as information and referral, support groups, respite, recreation, and family advocacy. For more information, call 877-DCS-KIDS or visit the website on your screen. Since 1998, Generations United's National Center on Grand Families has been a leading voice for families headed by grandparents, other relatives, and close family friends. The center offers a broad range of publications and resources for the families and those working for them, advocates to improve federal and state policies and programs, and provides technical assistance to government agencies and nonprofit organizations. To find out more, visit the websites on your screen. For a fact sheet on Tennessee's programs and services for grand families, you can visit this website. For a national chart comparing adoption and guardianship for kinship foster parents, visit this website.